It's Saturday morning. It's just after 11 o'clock in the morning. I started to feel nauseous. And in the middle of my chest, I could feel white lightning. And all of a sudden, a hyper real picture of my father's face appears like we were two souls in my one body. My dad and I had been estranged for about 17 years. Just the month previous, we had reconciled. We were both covered by a warm light of the most profound love. Our relationship was being healed. I saw a tunnel of bright light. All of the energy, the profound love, and my dad moved out through the top of my head and into the tunnel of light. The next morning, I got the phone call that my dad had a heart attack and passing away. It was that moment of getting the death certificate because it said 11:14 a.m. And that was the exact time of my experience.
Well, hello, Emily Squirrell and Corey Stephenson. Welcome to the show. I am truly honored by you joining me and looking forward to our conversation. How are you feeling today?
Good. It's been a beautiful Monday here.
I feel great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, so am I. I know you guys are coming in from outside of Toronto. I'm coming in from California, so we're going coast to coast today, and we got such a great story. Now, every week we bring you powerful stories about life after death, awakening, and what it means to be human. And if that resonates, you'll love what's coming. Today, I'm joined by Emily Squirrell, who has been an experiencer since childhood, seeing spirits, having out-of-body experiences and visionary dreams, and then at 18, witnessing a shared death experience during a fatal car accident. Years later, she had a second shared death experience at a distance with her father, which sparked a profound life transformation. Deep study across world traditions, contemplative practice, indigenous healings, ceremonies, and work in hospice. Wow. Well, Emily joins us with her partner, Corey Stephenson. His path took him from Bible school to philosophical study at Biola under J.P. Moreland through a deep theological expansion at Regis University, where he embraced a more interfaith, inclusive worldview. And now, together, they're navigating what it means to build a life and a love across traditions, rooted in shared values, respect, and the search for deeper meaning. We'll hear Emily's story, Corey's vantage point, walking beside an experiencer, and the practices that help them integrate love, grief, and daily life. Emily and Corey, it's a joy to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thanks, Brad. That is such a lovely introduction. So good to hear your story in someone else's voice.
Well, you know, I do my research and I like to get the audience all warmed up with a couple of tidbits to chew on before the fun arrives, right? And, you know, that's what we're doing next. Now, it's nice that several weeks ago we met at the IANS conference, the International Association for Near-Death Studies in Chicago, which was amazing. 700-800 people there. So many stories told, and you were one of the panelists there sharing your story as well. And what a great story it is. And, you know, while we were there, I had a chance to talk with Corey, your partner, and get his perspective on this. I haven't done this before. Normally, I interview the guest who had the experience, but this time, the guest is here with the partner. The partner is going to share the experience, sort of living and sort of experiencing also the experiencer. There's a lot of experiences having here. And so I think that's a new and fresh perspective for sure. We're going to ask a lot of questions and get into a lot of detail. Now, a lot of folks that come to these podcasts are very familiar with NDE, a near-death experience. But today we're going to talk about two SDEs, which is a shared death experience, and that is what Emily had. All right. And so the first one that she had, as I mentioned, was earlier at 18 and one later with her father. So, Emily, if you'd like, I would like to hand the microphone and the stage over to you to share your story of your amazing series of SDE experiences.
My first shared death experience was when I was 18, as you said. In hindsight, though, there were these experiences as a child that for some reason or for reasons unknown seemed to play some role in the experience. But when I was 18, I was working at a resort in Northern Ontario, and we would go up and spend all summer up there. And I went up with a number of friends of mine, and we would live on the property, work at the resort, serve families, and on the weekends we might head home to see our families a couple hours away. And the resort was in a more remote area. And so one Friday, we were planning to come home and see our families for the weekend. We were 18 and my friends were all 19. We had just been through some later years of high school. I had one more year left. A couple of my friends had just graduated. And it was Friday around dusk. It was a beautiful August evening. And we got into the car, and there were multiple cars heading home that weekend, but I was in the car with a friend of mine who was driving, and I was sitting in the passenger seat, and my friend Tim was in the back. And we left the resort to head home, and we were not, even a kilometer or two away from the resort when we pull onto a small two-way highway. In Muskoka, these highways are rather narrow. There are huge pine trees and lakes and rivers right beside the highway. And we were driving along, and at times, and this is somewhat known to be true, the people try to drive fast on those highways, and when doing so, they cut into the wrong lane to try to take the corner fast. Unfortunately, that's what happened to us, and a driver came into our lane. My driver swerved to avoid a head-on collision. But in doing so, she lost control of the car. And so we fishtailed along the highway and ended up sliding along the side of the highway. I remember the side of the Jeep hitting the posts, kind of one after another, and smashing the car window. The car ended up rolling 3 times down the embankment. And when we came to, I remember the car being upright at the bottom of the hill, but feeling immediately grateful for being alive. I thought instantly, I'm okay. Everything's okay. I'm going to be okay. And I went to turn around and look for my friend Tim in the back seat, and the car had been crumpled by the accident. We were thrust into a forest, and for whatever reason, I was able to get out of the Jeep, and I just felt this intuition, I guess, to crouch down and look underneath the car for my friend Tim. And so I got out and just immediately dropped down, and he was there underneath the car. He had been, unfortunately, thrown from the vehicle during the roll. And the car had landed on top of him. And so, it's an intense image, but I immediately felt this draw to move quite close to him and be near his face and his shoulders, which were right there close to me. And as I kind of drew in closer, there was an immediate sense of a change in the space around us. And I sometimes describe it like a mist or a type of peace where it was like all the sounds of the accident, all of the smells of the gasoline and all of the stress and the trauma, it got pushed out of this intensely peaceful bubble that we were in. And I felt like we were being wrapped and protected in this beauty, in this peaceful, quiet, loving space, or this loving mist. Sometimes I've described it like ginormous wings that were wrapped around us in like a basket of pure peace. And he was in the process of passing, or his soul was in the process of dying or leaving the body. And for whatever reason, I heard this voice and I felt this feeling. And so I spoke what I heard and I felt, which was, I love you. Everything is okay. And I'm your friend. And it will be okay. And I felt so much security and assurance about it. It was just this factual serenity that I was just saying what I felt. And it wasn't long after that I could feel the love that had surrounded us, this peaceful mist, kind of almost collected Tim in what I knew him to be and lifted him up and departed. And then I was still left with, the accident and the sounds of the accident and all of the realities of people and the stress, that those sounds started to come back in. It was like I could hear and come back into reality.
Did you feel that, Tim, sometimes you hear that people pre-plan the lives that we're in. And when you do, there's certain things you're going to have as objectives along the way, although you have free will to kind of navigate that. And yet sometimes you will have exit points created along the path. Mm-hmm. And so some people might say that Tim had an exit point at this age, at this time that maybe he chose to take. And so that, others say that there are no accidents, things happen for a particular reason. Were you able to connect with him to any greater degree to sort of feel that might be the case?
I felt as though this was a fated moment for both of us somehow. And that it also has played a huge role in setting me on a certain path, one that has taken me, it's been over 23 years since that day. It has taken me that amount of time. I'm still unpacking all of the meaning and what I sometimes describe as like almost an initiation of that experience.
Yeah, it does feel like each of you had an experience that day. Mm-hmm. His experience was transitioning on, and yours was to be there in that moment, to experience it, to feel that while you stayed here. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, integrate that back in and really go on a search for what does that mean and what do I do with that,
Right.
So that's amazing. And, as you tell this story, you told it in the panel there and you have it today. I'm sure Corey's heard it a few times also. Corey, we haven't had a partner on before to talk about their world and how they're experiencing this. How does hearing this story make you feel? What are your sort of thoughts in this sort of space? And does it align with them or not? Or are you open to new ideas? How would you characterize that?
Well, I always try to be open to new ideas, but of course, it's not always easy. We're always growing and we can get attached to certain things. And I've seen that in my own life, things that I once firmly believed I've given up. And so we evolve. You can only do your best in the moment. I guess something that comes through Emily's story here is so one figure that had a huge influence on me was a philosopher by the name of Dallas Willard, Christian man, and he talked about the kingdom of God, which is a big theme in the Bible, and it was Jesus' central message. The kingdom of God is at hand, and the way that he talked about it, Dallas, and which helped me and many others understand kind of the lived faith and vision of Christ, is that there is this metaphysically eternal reality always at hand, and it's good, and it's always reaching out. And so I think, Emily, there is a window of that. Now, if anyone in your audience has seen this movie, I recommend it. It's really tough to watch, so just keep that in mind. But a movie called The Thin Red Line. It's an older movie by a guy named Terrence Malick. He was a visionary guy, very spiritual, had deep spiritual themes in his movies. It was a movie about war, I think the Vietnam War, but there was this fellow who tried to abandon the ship, and he didn't want to go to war, and he had a kind of an awakening with this indigenous group on this island, and the way he paints it was just like there was something eternal, something benevolent at hand, and it so changed this fellow that when he did get picked up by the boat and was made to go to war, he said he was only going to be a medic, and you just see this fellow meeting people dying on this bloody, you would think, godless plane. How is God here? And it was like something was breaking through him to bring peace. He was holding someone dying, and it was very angelic. It was like he was in touch with something. So as I hear Emily, it just seems like something breaking through in that moment, this higher reality, this kingdom, and speaking words that were beyond her and beyond her capability in that moment to bring peace and help him to transition. So that's kind of how I hear that. And it gives me more confidence about that reality, which can be quite mysterious.
Yeah, no, I think that is a great point. And that is really what the podcast is all about. It's about people sharing their experience. You imagine there's a lot of people having a lot of different experiences, and then there are people that have beliefs that aren't really based on experience. They might be based on training or reading or, thoughts others have shared with them. And so there's a lot of different beliefs in the world, but this podcast is really about the experience that you had and then what came of that for you. That's what I really like to share. And I think that's what happened in that thin red line is that person had an experience and it changed their life going forward, and that was demonstrated there. And Emily, based on your experience, I know going forward, this changed and affected your life. Maybe you could go into that in a little more detail.
I really appreciate these types of dialogues, and, being with other experiencers is so incredibly validating, especially if you're someone like me who has felt quite afraid to share stories for a long time. So there were many, many years where I didn't share the story about Tim with many people. I told my mom, and I kind of told my brother or like people close to me, but I wasn't able to expand into the experience. I just felt really afraid, and I think that's probably how a lot of experiencers feel. Perhaps even more so those who are children or young adults like I was, pretty nervous about coming into the world and having a pretty big experience and not knowing how to place it. I think that's where, Corey's tried to help me, help support me with these different precedents, say that, these things have happened to people and they're written about in all these places, and they could help validate you too. These are real.
Yeah.
But after that particular event, I was 18, and I think I still felt a strong pressure to try to conform into being a young adult and kind of be normal and get over the experience or move on because university was coming and everybody else was moving on with their lives. 18 is kind of a coming of age time where everybody's about to, become a young adult and live a great life. And here I was feeling like I've just taken my first step into adulthood and I've encountered a tragic death of someone I deeply cared about. While at the same time, I've had now a spiritual experience that I feel unsure about talking about. And so the years that followed, I definitely felt a sense of kind of repression. Like I pushed the experience back in and just tried to, I put it in a box that I sometimes describe as like my strange events box. So it's just a mental category that I suppose everybody has. And some people's category box is bigger than others. And so I just put that in my strange experiences category, and I tried to go on with my life and live without it really impacting me to a great extent.
Well, let me ask you one thing. When you had the experience and he transitioned, did you think of it as a negative experience, or did you know that he was going on to unconditional love and that everything was as it should be? What was your takeaway? I
felt an intense dichotomy between just how tragic and grief-stricken everyone was around me, and it was traumatic. He was young, he was a great athlete, he was really well liked socially. Our parents knew each other, and so the community kind of rallied around me through this grief experience. But everyone's grief was so heavy, And so I almost felt a sense of guilt, as if I shouldn't share my experience because it would impede or somehow compete with their grief experiences. And I was just trying to be empathetic to how grief-stricken everyone really was. At the same time, I was also moving through shock. Like I didn't, as a young person, you kind of think you don't die. And so I was still moving through a major stage of grief. So what was my key takeaway? I have no idea. I think I was just astounded for many years between that dichotomy of intense grief and also this profound spiritual breakthrough event.
And I think with you, it wasn't until the experience with your dad that you're going to share that it really opened you up because of how vivid it was. And this experience with Tim was it was something you couldn't necessarily recognize, and you even have needed help by people like William Peters from Shared Crossing Project and others to see that. So sometimes these experiences aren't as in your face. They don't always hit you over the head, and we can miss some of these things. We can miss some of these genuine experiences.
Well, having that experience with your dad, getting a second take at that may have helped you even learn more about the first experience, right? And so, but I think in between those two, you went on a search, on a journey, and had a series of sort of educational and new ideas introduced to you. Is there an evolution there you can share?
Well, that major life transformation, it actually only happened after the second shared death experience, where I really flipped the table on my life. And that's where my experience begins to really sound a lot like NDEers who go through major aftereffects and huge career, relationship, lifestyle transformations. And I experienced all those things as well. But that was really only after the second shared death experience.
What was the time frame between the two?
So I was 18 at the time of the car accident and 29 at the time of the shared death experience with my dad. So it was just over a 10-year period.
That's a couple of years to think about it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So now you're going into this experience with your dad. So yeah, let's hear about that SDE.
I want to lift up too what Corey said, that something that's so important and perhaps listeners can relate to is I didn't even realize that was a shared death experience until I had the help of William Peters at Shared Crossing Project. And it was this shared death experience, the second one I'm about to tell you, that really brought me to his work and feeling a sense of need to find others who had SDEs. But it was his process that he really spent more time with me to go back into my history, and he extracted these experiences. He's like, tell me about, any other events in your life. And I thought like, oh, well, I've had this other strange experience where, an angel was there, et cetera, et cetera. And I really kind of dismissed it to some extent, knowing it was mystical, but I didn't really realize it was a shared death experience until William Peters' work, who I have to thank for really trying to pull that sense of courage forward in my heart. So it was about 10 years later, as I said, I'm 29. I'm living in a small apartment in downtown Toronto. I had been working many hours that week, something like 60, 75 hours. And so it's Saturday morning and I was sleeping in and dozing. And so I was laying in bed and the sun's coming in through the bedroom. And, I've worked hard, sleeping in, and it's just after 11 o'clock in the morning. I started to feel nauseous primarily. And so I was just still dozing in bed, but started to feel quite sick to some extent. And in the middle of my chest, I could feel what I describe as white lightning that started from my heart and began to expand. And it felt like it was shooting in all directions and getting bigger with every moment. And so these two experiences of feeling nausea and this quality of white light expanding in the middle of my chest, I didn't know what was happening. I had never experienced these sensations before. I never would have described white lightning in my chest. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be sick. And so I sat up out of bed and I put my hand on the wall to try to steady myself. And I thought I should probably try to make it to the bathroom just in case I was going to be unwell. And so I tried to walk around my bed towards the bathroom. And while I'm doing that, this white lightning is expanding. This feeling of nausea is expanding. The white light is starting to come into my visionary space, the same way I would describe auric migraines, if anyone has had those. And so it's these kind of patches or bubbles of white light that start to impede your vision. And I make it around the bed, and this white light has expanded quite large, and I put both my hands on the dresser to steady myself. I'm not able to say anything yet or ask for help, but just try to get a handle on myself. And then in that moment, I close my eyes, and all of a sudden, a hyper real picture of my father's face appears, not only in my mind's eye, but also somehow layered onto reality right in front of me. And it was like we were face to face, like we were two souls in my one body. And I could see out through my face and my soul, but I could also see out through his face as well. And there was a recognition between the two of us. Like I knew that he was there and he knew that I was there. We were aware of each other in this moment. My dad and I had been estranged for about 17 years prior to this event. And so we definitely had a strained relationship. Just the month previous, we had reconciled for the first time. My brother had said, I think Dad's not as healthy as he, could be or should be, and maybe you should see him and try to get together. And so we had seen each other and spoken once. All of that relationship kind of comes flooding back into the moment. And in that moment where we recognize each other, we were both covered by some, like a cosmic, it was almost like a honey, like a warm light of the most profound love that it drenched us in this kind of total, redeeming, loving, beautiful, bright love and forgiveness. And it was totally healing. We didn't say anything, but it was like our relationship was being healed by this love. And it was exquisite as well. Like it's really hard to describe, and I'm sure everyone says this. So we're always kind of grasping at straws to try to express what it's really like. But it's so exquisitely bright and intense. And there's also no hiding from it. Like it enters every part of you, every memory, your past, your present, your future, your relationships. Like it's complete. And so we're covered in this love. And not very long after, I felt that nausea begin to return to my awareness. And I started to feel it this time moving up from the bottom, like down from my legs, and starting to lift up through my body. And so I could feel this lifting feeling emerging, and I started to feel a pressure at the top of my head. And the pressure was so intense that I looked up to see if something was pressing down on my head. And as I looked up, I saw like a tunnel of bright light right over my head in my apartment bedroom. And with a large whoosh, I call it, all of the energy, the nausea, the white lightning, the profound love, and my dad all kind of moved up in my person, out through the top of my head and into the tunnel of light above me.
So yeah, this does sound like an NDE. It's interesting. Some NDEs have the heart just stops, and you're completely dead, and then it starts up again and so on. But others, it's not that dramatic. That, it could be that your heart rate is slowed, your blood pressure is lowered, and your soul pops out. There's various different forms of NDEs. But in this case, with this shared death experience, you felt this sensation come on, and then you got sucked up into this space. I suppose there's more to this story, but I'm also wondering, it kind of feels like I've heard these stories before where the person passes away, and before they actually leave, they go visit in this manner someone, and that is before they ultimately transition. It's interesting because it actually happened to me, although my father passed away, and it was a day or two later he came to me, much in this same way, before he completely sort of left maybe this frequency. I'm not sure.
Well, Brad, you're saying something really important, which is that shared death experiences have a wide range of variability, just like NDEs. And they can happen both at close proximity, so you might be in the room with the person, but they can also happen at a distance. And they can also happen sometimes in advance, slight advance of the actual time of death, or slightly after. And I would encourage anyone who's looking for more knowledge or insight about those spectrum of shared death experiences to get in touch with the Shared Crossing Project. But, what you described with your dad is entirely within the realm of variability of shared death experiences. Mm-hmm. And so in this case, I had this experience. I had no idea what had happened, except for I was overcome with intense emotion. I felt like I had just experienced like a new category of human experience. And all I could say at the time was I was just very emotional and just said, I love my dad, I love my dad, I love my dad. I was overcome with this quality of forgiveness and love and healing. We went outside shortly thereafter to go for a walk, get some fresh air, grab a coffee. And I looked down at the grass, and the grass appeared different to me. And I said to my boyfriend at that time, do you see the grass waving at us? It's happy to see us. Is the grass waving at us? And he was the one to say, I think you might have had some type of spiritual experience just now. And it was the next morning, I got the phone call that my dad had been discovered at home, having had a heart attack and passing away 100 kilometers away. And a few weeks later, I received the death certificate. And really, it was that moment of getting the death certificate and seeing the time of death on the certificate that really opened my mind to the reality of what had transpired, because it said 11:14 a.m. And that was the exact time of my experience in my bedroom. Mm. So that's when I knew, something profound has just occurred that breaks a number of categories in my mind about what reality is and ideas that I have about what's really going on here, where we go when we die. And so after that, I made major transformations in my life. I went through 2 years of what I feel were intense, mystical, an elevated mystical experience, where I kept having mystical experiences in quick succession for about 2 years. There's a photo I share sometimes that many of the pictures I was in for the 2 years following this event, there is a purple stream, like a purple halo stream that appears above me for about 2 years, strangely. I left my job in advertising. I realized that I did not want to leave a legacy in the world where I wasn't contributing to something good or beautiful or loving or helpful. I sold my car, left my relationship, I moved to Bali to study with different spiritual teachers. I studied Hinduism, Zen Buddhism, you listed them earlier, non-duality meditation. I sat in weeks of silence many times. I meditated for many years at great length. So I was just searching for any type of wisdom tradition that could help me understand what had just transpired.
Did any of those exercises and processes, meditation, various things you went through, did any of them reconnect you to such a dramatic spiritual experience?
I would say that they connected to the experience that I had in different ways, energetically through my body, or they kind of fleshed out more worlds of energy, connection, spirit helpers that exist. I don't think anything has been able to touch the intensity of that shared death experience with my dad. But they all continue to kind of give me tools or provide more healing in my life. Just because you have a shared death experience or even a near-death experience, I don't think it completely absolves all of our emotional healing.
No, I think it stirs a storm up. In fact, there's
Yeah.
a lot more emotional chaos that happens after in many cases.
That's right.
Folks talk about that forever. Oftentimes, the NDE, SDE experiences are the beginning, and it kicks off years and years of integration, search, questions, disconnecting from some that aren't at your frequency and reconnecting maybe with others that are at this frequency that you've changed into right now. And so, that kind of brings Corey back into the discussion here of all of these stories and these great details and these experiences. And remember, we're not about beliefs on this podcast as much we are about sharing experiences. We don't know why they happened. We didn't ask for them, right? The experience happened, and we are the ones that are sharing what they happened. And oftentimes we have questions. It's like, why did that happen? What's going on? What's on the other side? What does this really mean? What comes next? What goes on during the transition of us from this side to the other side? Or is there another side? With all that happening there, Corey comes into the picture. And how did that bring the two of you together on this topic?
She was not having a lot of fun during that period because she was fasting for rigorously for
a spiritual retreat I was going on.
So I invited her to come back to the restaurant another time. And a couple months later, this is 3 years ago, we've been together for about 3 years, I saw her in the restaurant again, and I went over and I was like, hey, good to see you again. Come over to the bar when you're done. And
you shared a piece of poetry.
I know. I shared not that I'm a poet and have much of that memorized, but I do have one or two lines of poetry stored in my mind. But she was just authentic and real. And so, I want to meet, I could tell she wanted to be with someone who was authentic. And so I shared this line of poetry, and one thing led to another. She was talking about how I forget how NDEs came up, but Raymond Moody came up somehow.
You brought him up.
Oh, did I bring it up?
Yeah.
Okay. It was a while ago. It was a couple years ago, but Raymond Moody came up, whom we both got to talk to at the conference and share how important his work has been for us. But she said, after bringing that up, because we're talking about spirituality, that she had a shared death experience. And so I was obviously immediately interested in that. We just kept dating, and ever since then, and I got to know more about her. I could share more about that, but that was the way in. Was, I guess, for me, just a little bit about my background, was I had been studying near-death experiences for a long time, more than 10 years. When I was in high school, I grew up religious, but I began having existential questions, questions about meaning and purpose in life. And I thought, if death is just the end, why does it matter if I live as a Mother Teresa or a Hitler? What is the significance of my life, of anyone's life, if we all die and there's nothing? Or, what is the purpose? There has to be an overarching purpose. So my sense was that God must exist. There must be an afterlife. And what's funny is a lot of people at my church didn't really get these questions, even though you pick up a book like Ecclesiastes, you'll find that stuff there. So my uncle helped me, who is well-read and philosophically minded, to work some of these out. And so I was on a pursuit myself as someone who hadn't had one of these experiences. And by the time I had met Emily, I was just really convicted about the reality of the soul and the afterlife and God and certain values, namely that God is love, infinite love, and what spiritual maturity looks like. And so I thought to myself, if I met someone who seemed awake and alive to God and was spiritually mature and had one of these experiences, I'd pursue a relationship with them, or, even if it was from a different tradition, something that might be challenging, and so, and then it's been 3 years of getting to know each other and learn and grow together.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I like the way, you were on your own path and then she had her experiences, and it looks like both of you were looking for someone that you could talk to about this. And, to be open enough to, wow, this is my experience. I wonder what it means. This is what I've studied. I wonder how that sort of jives with it. And maybe there's some course corrections we have to take, but maybe we're going to learn from each other. Well, that sounds pretty remarkable. So well done there. 3 years also. So that's good. I'd heard there's like an 80% probability that if you come back from an NDE and you're in a relationship, even married, that the relationship doesn't last because of the differences there, right? Now, you had yours before and you're connected now, and that's very common, is that, you do find a new path in the world, and in that you find someone that is on your path, not a path going in a different direction. So I think that's quite cool. Yeah. Now, I got this next section here that's called Heart's First Whisper. So it's a series of questions that I have all pre-packaged for you guys. And there's a few in here for each of you, of course. And it's meant for your heart to answer, not your mind or your thoughts. What do you think about that?
That sounds great. Sure. Let's do it.
That's your language.
Yeah, that's my language. I'm like, I'm going to kill this. This will be great.
Well, we're going into the first question then. And the first question is, when did you first realize the unseen was real? And how did that moment change the way you moved through the world?
I love this question. My meditation teacher asked this one question, and it's going to answer your question. But one of his primary questions to us was, what did you value before the world told you that it wasn't valuable, before the world said that that's not valuable? And so as a kid, I really deeply valued dreams. And my dream life was so intense. And I felt like I had out-of-body experiences as a child. I had sleep paralysis as a child. I had visionary and dream experiences as a child. And so I valued the unseen world as a little kid, so much that I wrote my first little grade 1 book about the spirits that I could see that would walk me home from school. And so I deeply valued the unseen world. And to me, it was real, and I assumed everyone saw and felt what I saw and felt. But there was some secret that I didn't understand about my own culture, that it was real, but we didn't talk about it. Mm. And that was my assumption.
Yeah, no, that's great, because not everybody has that experience. And so if you do talk about it, 9 out of 10 or maybe 99 out of 100 or more wouldn't be able to relate to it. And of course, if it's strange and unfamiliar, they might make fun, right? So, but the fact that you are doing sleep paralysis and having OBEs, out-of-body experiences at a young age, is amazing. And then you had sort of spirits walking you home. That was unseen to everyone else, but an experience that you had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They were deeply meaningful to me, and I thought the world was so much more magical than it seemed to everyone else.
Your world is much more magical. I wish I had that world.
I think for me, it was just this growing desire for the transcendent. Augustine, who is one big theologian of the heart and desire, said that the human heart is restless till it comes to find its rest in God. only God, the infinite, can satisfy this infinite longing in the heart. And so I felt drawn, and even, it's a long process. It wasn't one thing, but I always had this sense that there must be something beyond this world, because if this is all that is, I'm not going to be satisfied. And so it felt like maybe I could connect with some of the people who haven't had a more extraordinary experience.
Yeah, a more gradual.
Yeah, it's more gradual, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons a lot of people watch these podcasts too, because they haven't had an NDE or an SDE or an OBE, all these acronyms, right?
Right.
And so they find themselves sort of insatiably curious to listen to these stories over and over and over and over, kind of put the pieces together themselves and form what they think is highly probable. If there's that many people in these different corners of the world having similar experiences, all unique, but similar enough that you kind of you can put a little bit of shared knowing behind it. It seems to be their knowing, and I'd like it to be my knowing, but they keep researching, they keep watching these materials because they want to understand it more. And it brings comfort to a lot of people to know that as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a great answer from both you guys. So that does bring us to question 2, which is, what is one lesson love taught you in the first SDE that words can barely hold?
There is an incredible army of helpers to bring love into the world, even in moments that you think you're alone. And so that love has this outstanding capacity to send helpers in times of need. Yeah, that really, to know that much spiritual support may be around you in times of darkness, in times of sadness and grief or loss, that you're never alone, and that love will always send helpers.
Nice. And it feels like even after the second SDE with your father, you learned that even more, which really brings us into question 3, which is after your father's passing. With all this love that's been brought into this experience, what shifted most in your daily choices, your daily activities?
A deep desire to what I would describe as like right action, or to move in the world in a way that has the most amount of integrity, moral goodness, compassion, presence. I feel in daily life, and sometimes, I come up against different challenges in our culture because of that. But in my daily life, it's this almost intense conscientiousness that I want to make my presence meaningful and make meaningful choices.
So somehow that experience of getting a touch on the other side gave you a better appreciation for the time that you have here and how you really don't waste any of it and you embrace it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to really use my head, my heart, my intuition, my body knowledge to try to make decisions in the world, at work, in our relationship, with friendships. It's kind of like using whole person intelligence, because I know the value of every moment, like the ripple effect that we can have in the world. I want to bring goodness into as many moments as I can.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Bring goodness and right action, like you said before.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is you have a plan, you have an intention right now. But this brings us into number 4, question 4, which is, what practice reliably brings you back into calm following your practice and your intention when visions, grief, or life feel overwhelming?
This one has been essential for me. I've even been talking about it with Corey, with my friends, with other people in my spiritual community, that my daily morning practice, so sitting at my altar space, I meditated for all those years, but now I actually know how to rest in quiet and try to receive guidance in my heart. as well as like really learning how to be grateful, to offer gratitude in speaking out to the mystical, if you will. So it's almost like a way of genuinely being grateful and giving offerings and feeling glad for your life and asking for guidance, asking for support from that invisible army that love sends us every day. But this daily practice of sitting in front of my altar space, going into a state of quiet, and then really, praying with gratitude and asking for guidance to come into me. That has been the most reliable thing to put me back into a state of connection, alignment, help me resonate with that same love that I connected with in the experiences.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And I know the years that you went on that search, that spiritual search, all the connections that you made in the processes that you went through probably helped you figure out how to really be quiet and go into meditation when you want to. And also the importance of gratitude, as you mentioned, and love. And then what's key, oftentimes you hear the other side, spirit guides and others would help you, but you have to ask for it.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I hear sort of praying sometimes is thought of as asking for something, but you can also be have gratitude in that also, for sure. And then the meditating part sometimes is even listening for the answer to that and making sure you tune in, especially if the answer comes in your intuition or some other way, that you feel it and respond to it. So that's beautiful. Now that brings us to the next question for Corey, which is, hey, Corey, what's the most helpful way you've found to support Emily without trying to solve the mystery?
Did Emily send you that question? Yeah. Well, it is a challenge because I do feel it is my calling and I have an insatiable desire to make sense of things. And I know there's a limit to that, especially dealing with God, the infinite, But, knowing there's a limit to that, I've always tried to reinforce or hold up anything of genuine faith, anything that's going to lead one to God. One of the things that led me into kind of a more inclusivistic mindset is, this notion of the fruit of the Spirit, right? The Holy Spirit. What's associated with that is love or agape, a certain kind of sacrificial love, kindness, patience, faith. Think of like faith, like trust, peace, hope. So those are the things that if you see those things growing, and you can't not but believe God is there. And so, part of it has been, I think, just affirming the reality of these things. I do believe she's had these experiences. I do believe that there is a heavenly realm. I do believe that there are angels and helpers. And so I will support by affirming these things, just encouraging her. We went to Ions together. Actually, we were a little financially pinched 2 years ago, our first Ions, and I strongly encouraged us to go and to take that leap of faith. So I'm trying.
Yeah, no, that's a long list of items you got on there and ways you're supporting her. So that is impressive for sure.
The other thing I would say that what helps a lot that Corey does is he seems to have incredible senses. So he can hear and feel and listen to me, and he can sense the goodness and the authenticity and the connection that comes forward. Like, he's always had good senses. And so I find that really supportive of when I'm talking about experiences, is like he's really in touch with these wonderful senses around what he said, like fruit, as in like goodness and peace and love and forgiveness and all the beautiful virtues that he's really educated on, but he can really sense them when they come forward in someone.
Yeah. And I think with Emily too, and with this stuff in general is, it can get quite speculative, and, I'm open to a lot of different things. There are big ideas when you're dealing with this stuff, but Emily has always been grounded. And so even when you were asking that question earlier about was it pre-planned, and not to say we can't explore that, but she tried to be very rooted in what was given in her experience. And, what she learned with her dad was like this love and this reconciliation. And so working with that. And so that's been helpful. I've just seen it in her practically worked out for better in this life. And that's the sort of stuff with the NDEs that I really cling to, is what is like the practical wisdom that can really lead us into this spiritual fruit.
Yeah, no, well, that makes a lot of sense. And it really pops us right into the next question right here. I mean, we might even be sort of answering this one already, which is, what shared meaning or phrase anchors your relationship when faith languages differ?
It's funny because it's not a phrase per se, but it is almost this beautiful, loving, faith-filled humility that the intensity of love, of God, of the Great Spirit. Corey and I have learned to use one another's words because we better understand that we share meaning, despite the fact that our core spiritual orientations might be different. We do share meaning. But I think this, humility about not always knowing everything, not being able to have the answer and tell it to the other person, to leave room for the mystery, leave that seat at the table, let magic be a part of our lives, continue to grow. I think that anchors us a lot in terms of being really open to what you might call is like God's grace, and I might call, the mystery or just the magic of the Creator. And that really anchors us, as like being excited to stay awake to what may come, on all those unseen helpers and how we may grow or receive more experiences in our lives.
Yes. I like how you just said, make sure we stay awake. Yeah. So you don't fall into old patterns and just think that and you're not open anymore to new realities. And with that, you could end up getting sort of stagnating when you realize we're always learning new things all the time, and to be open to that. Yeah. And here's a new sort of category in number 7 here, which is, for a sensitive child like you were at 6, what single piece of guidance would you offer their parents today?
If you are a parent of a child like I was, instead of feeling like you might make light or dismiss a child's spiritual experience, my advice to you is dial right in close. Like move into a moment of emotional vulnerability, emotional availability, and spiritual availability with your child. Be open to the possibility that your child is in contact with something that maybe you've forgotten. And so that willingness to hear the child as being genuinely in contact with something would be my biggest piece of advice for a parent.
And I like how you said something that you've forgotten, because you're sort of reminding, or maybe telling them for the first time, that you already know this, but you've come to this side with a veil for forgetfulness, and you don't remember, and it's something you've forgotten, and it's an experience you're not having, but others are, so don't rule it out. The other thing I would say is they should definitely connect into your Instagram account and watch all the stuff you post there, for sure. And before we're done today, we're going to drop those links and share that information also Well, this brings us to number 8, which is, what does if there could be, a good death or maybe transition look like to you now after hospice and your 2 SDEs?
Death is a shared experience if we allow that to happen. And so even if, you're not an NDEer, or you haven't had a great number of mystical experiences, or you don't think you've had, you can still become available to the dying person in a way that allows you to share in the transition and let it change you as well. So death is a shared experience. We can go part of the way with others if we open our hearts and our minds. And so a good death is one that is shared, I think, is, surrounded by love, and is very ripe for healing. My relationship with my dad went through a pretty big healing experience, and I do see that in families in hospice, that relationships and unfinished business and a desire to clear the air or strengthen a connection or say something that someone has wanted to say their whole life. This is such a rich time, and that helps create a good death and can help create a shared experience.
Yeah, I do agree that the fact is it's a good time. I think there probably are many stories of folks that have reconnected like you before they passed away. Certainly there's others that are a little more sad that they didn't reconnect before they went on to the other side. But the notion that we should all, if we were all able to really know and connect at a spiritual level as people were passing, wouldn't it be amazing if like every death was a shared death experience? Doesn't it seem like it'd be better for everyone here as well as that person that's transitioning? And so hopefully we find with videos like this, podcasts like this, people realize this is the case and this is shared more and people expect this, and they somehow train and prepare and practice, do whatever they need to do to get themselves into a position to have that experience. That feels like it would be better and better for everyone involved. This brings us to our 9th and final question, which is, when you imagine the legacy of your love, Emily, Corey, and Galileo, what do you hope remains in the world because you were here? And I think you can each provide an answer to this.
I would like a legacy that genuinely believes that love transcends death. It goes on. And that the people who have passed love us still and can help us still from the other side and communicate, and that those relationships continue soul to soul. I would pray that we have a legacy that love is a continuum that reaches beyond death.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with love too, joy. Mm-hmm. One of the lines that I go back to and I want to embody as best I can. You can find in George Ritchie's book. He was the fellow who helped get Raymond Moody onto studying this stuff. The first person I think Moody heard an NDE of, but he has this wonderful description of God as vibrating with joy and mirth. So love, joy, mirth, that life's worth living, that it's good. And that's so stabilizing. When you think of a parent or a friend or someone who has this mirth, this zest for life. And so I would say this zest for life, this celebration, think of like a wedding, this celebration of love and overflow and the fecundity of goodness. And so honestly, just trying to tap into that and live that out, which is endless, as God is endless. The
other thing that I think Corey and I like to talk about and share and connect with others on is that, having a relationship where there are two spiritual and religious traditions is forming a bridge of love in the world. It's not easy to do. And it takes a lot of care and attention and open-mindedness and open-heartedness. And at times like the ones we're living in, having the courage and commitment to build a bridge of love in the world, that is absolutely something I hope that we impart on Galileo.
Well, you guys are a shining example of that, I think. Unconditional love without judgment, navigating the world with all its craziness, and kind of always bringing yourself back inside to the stillness to remember and to prioritize that's most important to you. Mm-hmm. So you guys are definitely demonstrating that today. I tell you, we as we wrap up the podcast, and we better do it because it looks like the sun is going down in Toronto. It's getting a little darker on your side. Is there any sort of final message, words of wisdom that you'd like to share with folks?
I would just say that the stuff that you're doing is so important. Again, I am someone who hasn't had an NDE or SDE. And the study of this stuff and listening to people who've had these, like soaking this stuff up is honestly a cornerstone of my faith in God. I don't know what I would be without this, just the sense of an infinite, loving God of light and of meaning for everyone. Just this stuff has been so important. So I would encourage your audience to go after this stuff and to not drift, and to go after this stuff and to just grow their faith as best they can, pursue it, because I know it can make a difference for this life as someone who hasn't had an experience.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of videos on YouTube these days, and you can't really go wrong trying to catch yourself a video sort of like this with other NDs and SDs and spiritual conversations. Emily, what's your closing comments for today?
If you've tried to talk to someone in your life about these experiences and it hasn't gone the way that you wanted it to, or you've had a difficult experience, or you felt hurt, try again. Don't be too afraid to keep trying to open your heart. Find people and moments where that spiritual availability, that vulnerability, or someone who can hold sacred space for you, for 15 minutes, so you can talk about something that is really precious in your heart. Keep trying, keep finding those people and teaching people how to hold sacred space for you. It's a journey, and you'll continue to kind of be up against that, but keep trying to tell your story, reveal your heart. Let your soul come forward. Say those tender things. So don't give up too easily.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And oftentimes in every community, you'll sort of find that if you search for it. But nowadays, with the internet, you can connect to anyone anywhere, and they certainly can connect to you. Mm. And so, and they should, to get more of this beautiful advice and this continued conversation. So Emily and Corey, thank you for your courage and tenderness. And for anyone listening who's navigating loss or awakening, remember, love is patient, practical, and present. And you can connect with Emily and follow her reflections and supported works in the links that I'll put in the description below. I know you're on Medium and Instagram and X. Are those the three main, or are there more?
I would say if someone wants to connect with me, find me on Instagram for the most part. You'll be more likely to get me there.
Everybody's on Instagram, so I'm sure they're searching for you right now, but the link is in the description. Now, if this conversation helped you, share it with someone who needs the hope today. So Emily and Corey, thank you for sharing your message and your light with us today. It's been a big pleasure.
Thank you so much, Brad. You're such a wonderful host. You create such a good space for us to share a real story. So thank you.
Well, yes, and this story is amazing. Like I said, we found each other at IANS, and I could feel it when you shared it on stage, and getting to know Corey was amazing. I think the audience got a feel for the two of you today as well, as best as you can in a podcast. And I do know that many folks will connect with you on Instagram and continue the conversation. Mm-hmm. So thank you. And to our listeners, if Emily's story moved you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and get into those comments. I get in there and reply to every one of them. So get in there and get active. And if this episode spoke to your heart, share it with someone who might need a little light today. And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and go beyond the illusion to discover your true self. Take care, everyone, and bye for now.